You know those stories that just stick with you? The ones that feel like a riddle wrapped in an enigma.
Hmm.
For over 7 decades, one of Australia's most baffling mysteries has done just that. The case of the Somerton Man.
Oh, definitely. It's a classic.
Imagine a well-dressed man found dead on a beach back in 1948, and for the longest time, I mean decades, absolutely no one knew who he was.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? How this single case has held such a grip on the public imagination.
Yeah,
And you're right, it's those layers of the unknown that make it so compelling.
yeah.
Our goal in this deep dive is to really, unpack this enduring puzzle, look at the strange clues that stumped investigators for years,
hmm
and understand the recent breakthrough that's finally shedding some light on his identity.
hmm
We're using quite a few different sources to guide us here.
And the scene itself, it was so striking right from the beginning. Picture this. Somerton Beach, South Australia, not some hidden cove, but a public place.
Right out in the open.
Exactly. And there's this man looking like he could have walked out of a magazine ad suit, tie, the whole 9 yards,
Immaculately dressed.
but with absolutely nothing on him to say who he was, no wallet, no identifying papers, nothing.
And what's fascinating when you first hear about it is that very public nature of his death. It wasn't a clandestine location, it was out in the open.
Hmm.
For someone to die like that, seemingly in plain sight, and yet remain completely unknown, that disconnect is what really sparked those initial questions and theories, I think.
And those theories, they went wild, didn't they?
Oh yeah, all over the place.
Initially, suicide was on the table, even though, well, there was no note. But then, you have to remember, the era of the Cold War was just getting started.
Right, the timing is key.
Suddenly, the idea of spies and secret agents seemed plausible to many. Some even thought it was maybe the tragic end of a love affair gone wrong.
It sounds like something straight out of a spy novel, really.
It does!
And you're right to bring in that historical context. The late 1940s were a time of considerable global tension, a real undercurrent of suspicion.
Definitely.
So when you find a well-dressed, unidentified man with these cryptic clues, it's perhaps not surprising that people's minds went to those more dramatic explanations. It really speaks to the anxieties of that period.
And there were definitely some really strange details that fueled those, let's say, more outlandish ideas. This wasn't just a John Doe situation.
No, not at all.
We're talking about labels carefully cut out of his clothing.
Deliberately removed.
And then that tiny scrap of paper discovered tucked away, bearing the words Tamam Shud.
Which I believe is Persian.
Yeah, Persian for finished or it is ended, which is, pretty ominous.
That Tamam Shud paper was such a crucial piece of the puzzle, wasn't it?
Absolutely central.
The fact that it was in a foreign language and its later connection to the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of poetry, well, themes of mortality and life's end, it immediately suggested there was more to this than a simple, straightforward death.
Exactly. And then, incredibly, a copy of that very book turns up.
The plot thickens.
Right. And the last page, the one that would have contained those exact words, had been torn out. A perfect match.
Wow.
But it gets even stranger. On the back of this book were a series of seemingly random letters scrawled.
The infamous code.
Yes. And naturally, everyone jumped to the conclusion that it was some kind of secret code. Spy stuff again.
Now, this raises an interesting point about that supposed code. While the idea of a hidden message is certainly, intriguing,
Very intriguing.
when you look at the statistical analysis, it doesn't really hold up as a sophisticated cipher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was more likely just a random sequence of letters, or perhaps, as some have suggested, it was simply an aide memoir, something maybe just to jog his own memory. It lacked the kind of structure you'd expect from a real coded message from that time.
Huh. Okay. So maybe not a secret agent code after all.
Probably not, no. But
Oh,
still mysterious.
And the connections kept coming. Inside that same book was a phone number,
Right, the nurse.
which led investigators to a nurse named Jessica Thompson, who lived not too far from the beach. Apparently, when she was shown a plastered death mask of the Somerton Man, her reaction was quite strong. Very emotional, apparently.
Yeah, that's always been a key detail. Why is such a strong reaction?
Plus, and this is where it's really uncanny, her son had a rather rare dental condition. He was missing his lateral incisors. And it appeared the Somerton Man had the same thing.
Whoa. That's specific.
Right. That sparked all sorts of theories about a possible family link, obviously.
The connection to Jessica Thompson became a really significant line of inquiry early on, and you can see why.
Oh, absolutely.
Her strong emotional reaction to the death mask, combined with that unusual physical similarity of her son, It certainly suggested a potential personal relationship. It was a thread that many researchers followed closely for years.
But after all that time, those decades of unanswered questions, we've finally seen a major development. This is where it gets really
A
interesting.
breakthrough moment.
Enter Professor Derek Abbott, an electrical engineer.
An engineer.
All right. And forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick.
Wow.
It's quite the unexpected pairing, isn't it? To crack a biological mystery that stumped police for generations.
It truly highlights the power of bringing different areas of expertise together, doesn't it?
It really does.
Professor Abbott, with his background in engineering, approached this problem with a fresh perspective, maybe one that traditional forensic science hadn't been able to provide on its own.
Right.
And Colleen Fitzpatrick's skills in forensic genealogy were absolutely essential for navigating the immense amount of data in those DNA databases.
And their key piece of evidence, hair.
Hair.
Tiny strands of hair that were incredibly still embedded in the plaster death mask that was made way back in 1949.
Wow, after all that time.
Yeah, about 6 months after the man died. And it's important to remember his features will likely have been somewhat distorted by that point.
Still, the fact that they were able to extract usable DNA from these hairs, which were decades old, I mean, that's really a testament to the incredible advancements in DNA analysis. Initially, they focused on the hair root, which is where you'd traditionally expect to find the best DNA.
Right. But those initial attempts with the root didn't work out. So they took what seemed like a long shot, analyzing the hair shaft itself, the part that, everyone had previously thought was useless without the root.
And surprisingly, that hair shaft yielded a significant amount of usable DNA, something like 2 million SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms.
2 million from the shaft.
Yeah. Now, think of our DNA as a very long book.
Yeah.
And SNPs are like specific typos that tend to run in families.
Okay.
Even if you only have small ripped pages of the book fragmented DNA, you can still look for those unique typos to connect them. This was crucial because, interestingly, while short, broken pieces of DNA like you find in the hair shaft aren't great for traditional crime scene matching.
Right, STR analysis.
Exactly. But they're perfect for this family history approach of SMP analysis. It's like having lots of small pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, reveal the bigger picture of ancestry.
Ah, I see.
Plus, the keratin in the hair shaft actually helped protect that fragmented DNA over all those years, maybe better than the softer root.
That makes sense. So, armed with these millions of SNPs, they turned to these massive genealogical databases like GDmatch Pro.
The public databases.
And then started the monumental task of building a family tree. Can you even imagine the sheer scale of that? Over 4,000 individuals.
The amount of genealogical work involved was truly immense. It required painstaking research, connecting countless individuals and their family histories, cross-referencing records. It's like trying to assemble a gigantic and incredibly complex family portrait, one tiny piece at a time.
Unbelievable effort. And then came what they called the champagne moment.
Ah, the breakthrough.
Finally identifying a distant relative within the database and then using the DNA of living descendants to really pinpoint the connection through triangulation.
That moment of confirmation, after all those years of dead ends and speculation, must have been incredibly significant. By finding matches across multiple living relatives, they could build a really strong statistical case for the identity.
So the big reveal, the man they identified.
Yes.
Charles Webb, born in Melbourne in 1905.
Carl Webb,
And it turns out he was an electrical engineer and instrument maker.
an engineer himself. Interesting parallel.
Isn't it? And interestingly, there wasn't an immediate death record for him, which might explain why he stayed unidentified for so long.
Right. The initial lack of a readily available death record for Carl Webb likely contributed to the enduring mystery. It suggests maybe his death occurred away from his usual residence or under circumstances that weren't immediately obvious or easily documented.
So who was this Charles Webb? We've learned a bit. He was educated at a technical college, which is now Swinburne University of Technology,
Okay.
and he worked as an electrical technician. He got married to Dorothy Robertson in 1941, but sadly they separated in 1947 and eventually divorced.
Separated in 47
And here's a potentially important detail. Dorothy moved to South Australia.
to Adelaide or nearby.
That's South Australia, yeah. Which, as we touched on earlier, makes it a plausible reason for Webb to have been in Adelaide at the time of his death. You start to wonder if he was trying to maybe reconnect with her.
That piece of information about Dorothy's move certainly provides a tangible human connection and a possible motivation for Webb being in Adelaide.
Yeah.
It adds a layer of, well, personal narrative to the mystery.
It does. And his family situation at the time also seems quite fragmented. His parents had passed away, some of his siblings were either deceased or ill,
Hmm.
and it's even been discovered that a sister unknowingly left him money in her will after he had already died.
Oh, wow. So sad.
It paints a picture of someone who might have been quite isolated in his later years.
The details of Webb's family situation do suggest a degree of social isolation, or at least a weakening of family ties. This might explain why his disappearance didn't trigger an immediate or widespread search, allowing the mystery to persist for so long.
Makes sense. And what about that long-standing theory about Jessica Thompson's son being somehow related?
Yeah, the dental connection.
Well, the DNA evidence has now definitively ruled that out.
Really?
There's
Okay.
no genetic relationship there, which finally puts that particular line of speculation to rest.
That's actually a really significant outcome of this DNA analysis. It clears away one of the most prominent and, frankly, emotionally charged theories that had surrounded the Somerton Man's identity for decades.
But even with a name, the full story isn't over, is it?
No, not by a long shot.
There are still those really crucial unanswered questions, like what actually caused Charles Webb's death?
A cause of death, yeah.
The original autopsy mentioned things like blood in his stomach, an enlarged spleen, a congested liver findings that suggested possible poisoning.
But they never found anything specific.
Exactly. No specific poison was ever identified. They even considered rare and difficult to detect poisons like digitalis and strophanthin back then.
The unresolved cause of death remains a central part of the ongoing mystery. The initial autopsy findings strongly hinted at poisoning, but the lack of an identified substance leaves open the possibility of, well, a sophisticated toxin that wasn't detectable with the forensic technology available in 1948.
Or maybe something else entirely. And what was Webb doing in his final weeks? Where was he staying? What brought him to Somerton Beach specifically?
Exactly. Those movements are still a blank.
And what about that so-called code in the Rubaiyat? Even if it wasn't a complex cipher, its original meaning for him, if any, still eludes us.
These are fundamental questions that still need answers. Webb's movements and activities leading up to his death, the true purpose of those scribbled letters, whether they were a simple reminder or something else entirely, and the precise significance of the Tamam Shud phrase. It all remains open to interpretation. While Tamam Shud translates to finished and could suggest a suicide note, well, without more context, we can't say that definitively.
Right, and let's not forget those unusual items found either with the body or in his suitcase, things like a stencil kit,
The stencil kit, yes, odd.
an American feather stitch on his coat, even a potential link to horse racing that some have tried to tie to the code. Were these just random possessions, or could they offer more subtle clues into Webb's life and what happened in his final days?
Those unusual items could certainly hold further clues to Webb's background, his interests, perhaps even his travels. Like you said, the American stitching on his coat might suggest a connection to the United States at some point. The stencil kit hints at a possible occupation or hobby.
Right.
Each of these seemingly small details could be a piece of a larger puzzle that we haven't fully assembled yet.
And there was that really intriguing detail about the lead levels found in Webb's hair.
Ah, yes, the isotopic analysis.
They fluctuated quite a bit, with a significant drop in the month or so before his death. That strongly suggests a change in his routine, maybe a new job, or even a different location he was living in.
The analysis of lead levels in his hair provides a fascinating timeline, almost like a historical marker in the hair itself. That noticeable decrease in the month prior to his death strongly implies a shift in his environment or daily activities, potentially offering a crucial clue to his movements in those final weeks.
It's quite remarkable, isn't it, that an electrical engineer ended up playing such a vital role in solving this very biological mystery.
It really is.
Professor Abbott even talked about how concepts that engineers are familiar with, like graceful degradation, are relevant when you're analyzing these massive S&P data sets.
It really underscores the value of looking at problems from different angles and bringing diverse expertise to the table. The idea of graceful degradation, where a system can still function effectively even with some loss of data, well, that applies directly to the analysis of fragmented DNA.
How so?
Unlike traditional forensic STR analysis that needs relatively intact DNA, the sheer volume of SNP data allows for identification even when some information is missing or degraded. You have so many data points that losing some doesn't kill the analysis.
Got it. He also mentioned this technique called imputation, which is a mathematical framework kind of similar to error correction in digital signals.
That's right. Imputation is a sophisticated statistical technique that allows researchers to infer missing genetic information based on patterns in the surrounding data. Think of it like filling in the blanks on a partially damaged document using the context.
Okay.
It's a concept that's well established in fields like electrical engineering and signal processing, but has become increasingly important in advanced DNA analysis like this.
And despite all the technological advancements, it sounds like a lot of the genealogical work was still very manual,
Oh, incredibly so, I imagine.
leading Professor Abbott and his team to even develop their own new tools, like visualizing birth locations on Google Earth just to manage that incredibly vast family tree.
The fact that they had to create their own tools really highlights the pioneering nature of this investigation. It demonstrates the immense scale of the genealogical research and the innovative approaches they had to take to manage and analyze such a massive amount of data.
So, where do things stand now? Officially,
Wow.
the South Australia police actually exhumed the Somerton man's body back in 2021.
Yes, I remember that.
And they stated they were cautiously optimistic about their own independent DNA analysis. But based on the latest information we have, which goes into early 2025, they haven't yet publicly confirmed the identification of Carl Webb.
Right. The ongoing investigation by the South Australia Police is a critical step in officially verifying these findings by Abbott and Fitzpatrick. Their independent DNA analysis will provide further confirmation and hopefully contribute to a more complete understanding of the circumstances surrounding Webb's death.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that there haven't been further public announcements likely just reflects the thoroughness and complexity of their work. These things take time.
Sure. So the key takeaway for everyone listening to this deep dive is this. After more than 70 years of mystery, it's now highly probable that the Somerton man was Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. We finally have a name to connect to that haunting image on the beach.
Absolutely. While the identification of Carl Webb is a truly significant breakthrough, a huge piece of the puzzle, it's important to remember that many crucial questions about his death and his final days still remain unanswered.
Yeah.
The core mystery, in many ways, has sort of evolved rather than completely disappeared. We know who, but not entirely why or how.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how these incredible advancements in technology combine with this kind of collaborative spirit across different fields, engineering, genealogy, forensics,
Yeah, the interdisciplinary approach.
how it can unlock even the most stubborn of mysteries. It makes you wonder what other long-forgotten cold cases might be solvable using similar approaches.
Definitely.
And beyond the puzzle itself, it's so important to remember that Carl Webb was a real person with his own life story. And while a major piece of that story has now been found, there are still so many chapters we don't know.
This case truly highlights the enduring power of human curiosity and the transformative potential of scientific progress in unraveling historical enigmas. It's also a powerful reminder, like you said, that behind every cold case, every unidentified individual, there is a human being with their own unique history and experiences.
If you're now completely hooked, like I am, and want to delve even further into the remaining questions surrounding the Somerton man, or maybe we should say the case of Charles Webb now,
Seems appropriate.
we highly recommend you explore the original articles and documentaries about this